Good morning, Teach Better family. It is Thursday. Wow, it's September 30th already. It's 7 a.m. Eastern time, which means it's time for your daily drop. And this is where we go live every day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern on Facebook, on Twitter, on Twitch, and on YouTube. And of course, the audio goes up on our Teach Better Talk podcast. So if you're listening later, hello, thank you, subscribe, and leave a review for the podcast. But if you're here with us live, drop in the comments, say hello. We've got the amazing Andrea Bittner here with us. I see you got your coffee, so we can do our quick cheers right now.
Absolutely.
To say good
Cheers
morning.
to Thursday.
And we are going to get into a few things. We're going to definitely talk about your book at some point. We're going to talk about all the work you do in your school and what this year has been like. We're going to touch on this week's theme of the power of question. Again, in there, I know you got some good ideas for us to talk to there. I have really cool good news stories to share a little bit later as well. So we're going to get into it. So grab your coffee, join us, whether you're on the road or finishing your hair or getting dressed or packing stuff up before you head out the door. We're super glad that you're here with us. Love to see you in the comments. We'll be back in about 25 seconds. Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday to you. Oh, and as long as we're saying happy Thursday, I have to say happy birthday to two from our team, which is Becky Schnaxer and Nikki Piercy. Birthdays today as well, so super excited. Birthday. So happy birthday, Nikki and Becky. And happy Thursday. We're almost to Friday, which means we're almost to the weekend, so getting through. I know you're still at home. You're going to be with us and then head right over to school. So it's exciting. We are going to get into some stuff. We're going to get into the brainstorm bank right away. So if you go to teachbetter.com/brainstorm bank, there's a form you can drop in any questions, stuff like that we'll bring up. We can talk through. You can also drop ideas for themes we should think about, guests we should have, whatever that might be. Of course, if you're watching with us live, you can drop in the comments and let us know your thoughts, ask questions, anything like that. Andrea, I want to get in, just kind of dive right into it with you. But before we get into that topic and stuff and really get into that stuff, because I know you have some resources and some ideas for us, I wanted to take a minute just to, in case anybody doesn't know who you are, you can to kind of introduce yourself and learn a little bit about you. So can you tell us the whole thing of who are you, where you at, what do you teach, what do you do, what's your favorite color? Just the whole thing here.
Sure. So good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Bittner. I am a teacher of about 21 years right outside of Philadelphia, PA. I teach in the suburbs of Philly. And we hope you've been here. We hope you've enjoyed some of our fun foods and activities we have in this city. And I have worked the bulk of my career as a reading specialist and an English language learner teacher. And so I've worked with at-risk kids as a support teacher for quite a long time. And I've worked with kids in grades K through 12. So I've had the awesome experience of getting to work with students at all different grade levels and all different proficiency levels. And I absolutely love what I do. I've been working, good morning. I've been working with teachers as well in a coaching perspective and a mentor perspective. And I just authored my very first book this year, which is called Take Me Home. So I'm a proud member of our education family and looking forward to hanging out with everybody today.
I love it. And you forgot your favorite color.
I would say turquoise because I love pretty water at the beach.
Oh, I like it. Okay. And we talked briefly before we went live. So I got to ask you, I'm going to ask you live now, Geno's or Pat's?
Oh, we got to go Geno's.
So I know you said your husband's from
South Philly,
right? So I've heard, so we were recommended when we were there. This has nothing to do with anything we're talking about today. So I apologize, everyone. But any of our Philly friends can drop in. When Chad and I were there a few years back, I was telling you that we ran and we ended up having cheesesteak early in the morning. We recommended either Geno's or Pat's. But I've had other conversations with folks from Philly who are like, oh, that's like the tourist ones, like that. Mm-hmm. Is that true? Like, is there ones that you go, like if you go to the city, you go there, or you're like, no, that's where Jeff and Chad can go. We go here where the good stuff is.
Yes. That is where I go. And we actually took our daughters there who are ages 12 and 14 for the first time in their life just this summer. So that was something we had to kind of give them a rite of passage to. But yeah, that's
did you do Geno's or Pat's?
Oh, we did Geno's.
Geno's, okay. Okay. All right.
Yes,
I'm curious whether your husband has other ones like the hidden gems that only the
I'll
locals know
find
about and
out
stuff.
for
So that
sure.
you let me know. That'll be interesting and good to know. So I'm curious. So you've been teaching for 21 years now. And what led you to the ELL route? Like
Sure.
for me, like someone who doesn't do that, I'm like, that seems like a really difficult job
Oh,
because you're not just trying to educate kids, but you're also trying like they're learning how to speak the language in which you are communicating with them to help them learn. To me, I'm like, that just seems so difficult. What
oh,
was
it's
it
so
that
much
got that
fun.
passion? Because I know how passionate you are about it. So I'm really curious to hear that.
Oh, I appreciate that. So I started out as a high school English teacher, and I worked with those kids for a couple of years. And I found out really quickly coming out of college that the students I were assigned to work with didn't know how to read. And it motivated me enough to go back to school and learn how to be a reading specialist. And when I started to do that work as a reading specialist in a different district, there was one group of English language learners who were in a classroom next to me during the day. And I started to get to enroll them into the support program that I had as a reading specialist in sixth grade. And there was a particular teacher next to me who I really mentored under. And I started to get curious about that field. I'd never worked with English language learners myself at that point early in my career or been trained how to work with them. And so I just fell in love with these kids and this community and the passion they have and the motivation and dedication they had to learning. So I started to get curious about that. And I thought, well, how do you become an English language learner teacher? So I went back to school again and I did a 2-year program and I learned all about how to teach kids how to read, write, listen, and speak to English. And it was such a great time for me because as I started to learn more, I could serve them better in their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point, I got an opportunity to become a English language learner teacher with the local intermediate unit. So I left my position as a reading specialist at the middle school and I started to work for 6 years at that time, part-time as an English language learner teacher because my girls were babies. So I was really fortunate. I got the best of both worlds. I was that mom that would be dressed, for school, running my daughter to making music, doing that for about 10 or, 10 minutes with her, and then running to school, teaching for about 4 hours and running back. And I absolutely loved that time because it really taught me about how to start to work with these kids. And my very first student's name was Sergio, and he was from California. And he was what we would call an entering level kid. He knew zero English at the time. And he taught me more than I could ever teach him, about starting to work with these students. So as I started to work with more and more of them, I found that this is my niche, this is my passion. I really want to teach people to start to learn that when you work with English language learners, treat that time that they're learning English more like an asset, not a handicap. And I started to learn that a lot of the kids felt like the fact that they were becoming bilingual or they were bilingual was not an asset for them. And so I started to kind of dive into that passion of, no, yes, like you're amazing, you're special, like you've got this secret party trick, that other kids don't have, so let's blossom that. And that's kind of where it grew from there into 21 years now.
I love it. And so do most of your students, are they coming in with one other language? Do you have some of them that are already come in bilingual and they're learning English as a third or a fourth? Like
Yeah,
what's this?
I absolutely do. So I have kids from all gamuts. We have 6 levels of English language learners.
Okay.
So we have kids who come in who know no English. We have kids who come in. I have one I just met yesterday who speaks English, French, and Arabic. And she's coming in, she's from Lebanon, which I think is wonderful. We have kids that come in who were kindergartners and they spoke, Twi with mom at home until kindergarten. And that's our first experience. We're so diverse. We've got kids that are exchange students, adopted students, crossed the border, born here, waited 10 years to get their visa, came after mom and dad, or came first and then mom and dad came later. So in addition to all their experiences, that formal schooling of what they had is really what influences where their English level is when they come to me.
So many different stories and journeys.
Yeah.
It's so cool, which I know you touch on in your book. So we're gonna touch on that later. I want to have you tell us about the book. But I want to dive in. This week's topic is all about the theme of this week is all about questioning and using the power of question and how we can utilize that to help our students or ourselves to learn more and to be better and to continue to help kids on their journey and stuff. So been some really great conversations. Ray had a great conversation with Tom Schimmer and then an amazing conversation yesterday with Dave Schmittou. She had me on Monday, but that was just whatever. So I'm excited to dive in because this is I'm interested to see it from your EOL perspective and how you utilize these different techniques and stuff. So can you, when we think about that, when I say the theme of, the power of questioning and using questioning with students and stuff, what's the sort of the first thing? I'm putting you right on the spot. Sorry. What are the things that kind of pop in your head? Like, how do you think about that? When do you think about that when working with your EOL students of like, all right, how can I use questioning to help them get where they need to be?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think about that every day. And I think the first word that comes to mind for me when it comes to questioning is engagement. So how am I going to get these students to engage with myself, with their own ideas, and with each other for the majority of the class? Because I learned a long time ago that if we do all the talking and we do all the answering and we do all the reading and we do all the writing for them, the only one getting better at it is us. So we have to be willing to go through the mountains and valleys when the questioning is going well and maybe not so well, and the adjustments along the way, and be willing to go on that ride with them to get to our end result. So in terms of engagement, I do a lot of things. In ELL perspective, we're thinking reading, writing, listening, and speaking, which is not that different than any other perspective of any content area I think that we work with. So the first thing that we always do is how am I going to engage them in that lesson? And shout out to Dave Burgess and the TLAP book, because that's one that we used, to get them engaged in the topic from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So for example, last year when we were virtual, that was really tough, to get that questioning going with engagement. So something we used was, the daily song, the daily joke, the daily conversation topic. My students now, when they come in, we're in person, thank God, again, they come in and I've got zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So there are voting questions for them every single day that they have to immediately go to the board. They've got to read the question and they've got to put their stick for a vote. And because I see students in 8 different grade levels every 30 to 40 minutes all day long, it's a way to connect them together as one whole group because they're excited with the questions to see what the answers were for the following day, which I created. So, questions like, this today, would you rather go to the aquarium or the zoo? If you could travel, would you travel by plane, by train, by automobile, etc.? So I try to connect it to whatever we're learning that day, but it also connects the kids and it promotes reading, writing, listening, and speaking right away, which I like. So that's one engagement strategy I use. The other engagement strategies I use come from total participation techniques, which is how can I incorporate discussion, think, pair, share, movement in the room. We have a lot of kids today that need to move. Yeah. So, are they using partner work for 10 minutes and then coming back together and then having time to think individually with classical music on? So pushing, those conversations and giving kids time to think, discuss, and then come back not only promotes a collaborative environment for them in the regular classroom, but for ELLs who are afraid and anxious to talk sometimes, especially when they're new kids learning the language, it reduces that anxiety level so that they feel more confident, not only in small group, but in large group as well. One of my favorites to use is called hold-ups, if anyone has ever used those. So that's total participation technique, right? How as a teacher can I analyze all the time their answers? So whether every kid has a whiteboard or every kid has an index card, I've seen it done that way. I've seen it done with a yes, no, maybe sign posted across the room where kids are running to different answers, or you could post different answers. How am I involving as many kids as possible so that everybody's on point all the time? So holdups are if I'm in math class and I'm asking answers to questions, everybody writes it on their whiteboard and holds it up. And now I've got to scan real quick of who's got it.
Yeah.
If it's a discussion question, maybe, you've got a chance to write your answer and then hold it up to a partner, and discuss it with them first. So accountability, I think that's the most important piece with questioning is the engagement piece and the accountability piece.
Yeah, I love that hold up strategy because one, it's fun. You write in, there's movement, right? But also, like you said, you have this ability now. You can scan and see where everyone's at, and
Yes.
Hey, everyone's got it, or hey, most of my class doesn't have this. We need to revisit this, or hey, there's just 2 to seem off. So now I need to have questions and talk with them and get into that. So can you hold up the other book that you shared, and then give us the author and stuff too? I want to make sure that anybody who's listening and watching can go check that book out and grab it if it interests them.
Yes, it's Persida and William Himmeley. They're a married couple. They're professors at Millersville University in Pennsylvania. And this is from years ago. It's called Total Participation Techniques.
Nice.
And
I love
they
it.
actually have another one coming out called Why Are We Still Doing That? That comes out in September. So that may be a great
I
read
like
as
the
well.
sounds of that one because there's a
Yes.
lot of those things. So, but I love that I saw on the cover, like it talked about it mentioned, active learners. And that's what you were talking about, like this active learner, where if I'm asking a single question to a single student, everyone else in the class can just sit and relax.
Yes.
Right. But by engaging them for something like a hold up or whatever it might be, like I'm, for lack of a better word, forcing them. I mean, you talked early on about the engagement piece. That's the first thing you think about. Right now, I'm engaging everyone. And it's not scary to hold up your answer as much as to be the single student putting their hand up, right? So if I'm a little nervous, I'm a little worried, I'm not speaking English really well, I might be less likely to raise my hand. But writing on a whiteboard, I could probably do that, right? It's a little less, I think, scary for them. Is that accurate? Am I saying that? I mean, when
Absolutely.
I say that?
And providing those prompts for the kids that may not have the language to answer the complete answer yet. As a teacher, you could quickly put on their whiteboard a sentence frame. And now all they've got to fill in is one word, if they're a new language learner, for kid, and you could challenge other kids. If you walk by and they could say more, you could have that expo ready to go and you could ask a quick question on their whiteboard and make them expand it. So it provides a lot of opportunities in that way. And I also feel like with questioning, that practice, right? That I do it, then we do it, then you do it strategy, that layering provides the think time that kids need to work through new information.
I love it. Break that down. Break down the I do it, we do it, you do it strategy and how that would look like. Can you give us like an example of how you would do that in a classroom?
Sure. So if you're teaching a new concept, let's say you're working in social studies and you're teaching about parts of the globe. And so first you're going to think about how am I going to model this, right? So you're never going to assume that students are aware of any of the vocabulary that you may need them to have or any of the strategies that they may need to find out information about it. So you're going to model. I'm going to bring in something real, right? I'm always big about bringing in real things for kids and working through the parts of the globe. I'm going to show you all these parts. And then maybe if that's your lesson for that day, that's great. And then maybe the next day, now it's going to be practice. We do it. So now I'm going to give you support. I'm going to put you with a partner strategically that I think would be a great conversationalist for you. And maybe I give them a picture of a globe and now they're labeling it together. Or maybe they all have real globes and they're discussing all the different parts. And in the meantime, I've got those visual words up from yesterday somewhere so that when they are speaking and listening to their partners, they have a reference. And then after that day, or maybe that part of the class, now I'm going to pull back a little bit, and now I'm going to give you each your own globe, and I'm going to see what you know, because now you're going to label it yourself. So it's that layering approach every single time that relinquishes accountability and relinquishes responsibility so that kids feel anxiety-free and comfortable in their learning. And we know that when they can do that, there's space to learn more.
I love it. And there's a connection. I do this all the time. I mean, Andrew, I'm not sure if you know, but like I'm one of the only people on our team who was never a classroom teacher. I come from the world of business and a lot of my time in hospitality management, managing restaurants, stuff like that. And there's a technique when training new employees at a restaurant that is show, tell, let, do. It's the same type of thing. It's show. I'm going to show you, explain it, and then I'm going to tell you what we just did, and then I'm going to let you do it. And sometimes the tell is they referring it back to you and telling you, and then you let them do. So it's a similar thing of like it releases that anxiety instead of just throwing them in, right? Let it go. But just the ability to get to the point where now they're able to do it, right, is such an important part, because then you're actually learning, letting them explore that way. So
it is, and even letting them evaluate the process along the way. I have seen with the I do, we do, you do, where students can reflect, and you can have that as part of your assessment and your questioning is, do you feel you're ready to move to the independent phase of this? And as maybe for older students or even with younger students with, smiley faces or different, words you could use, and maybe why or why not. And then that gives you more feedback. And I feel like that's what questioning is really about. It's about getting that feedback to know if you can continue to move with your students or reteach.
Now let's talk about that, because that's such an important piece of that is the feedback, right? And then we're asking questions, we're getting feedback, and then what are we doing with that feedback? And so can you walk us through sort of your mindset of like, all right, when I receive the feedback, here's all the different types of feedback or knowledge I can gain from that feedback, and then what kind of steps I can take from there. Does that make sense what I'm asking? So how does your brain process that maybe when you're getting feedback that wasn't what you were expecting or hoping for, and how do you
Sure.
adjust your practices utilizing that?
Sure. Well, I always think, when we're working with kids, like, they're driving the bus, right? We're on their ride. So you're not really sure how it's going to go, every time you teach them a new concept. So that feedback piece is essential. And it's essential that it's timely, right? So I would make sure that, at least once or twice a week, I'm getting some type of feedback from students. And that can be in so many different forms. That can be in terms of an exit pass, where yesterday I had the kids answer one comprehension question on their way out about a story they just read. They lined up at the door, firing questions at each of them, and then I get a sense of, okay, did we understand the overall main idea of this story? It can be something like an exit pass where students have to fill in a sentence frame or tell me something that they learned that day, and that gives me feedback about the story. In the beginning of class, to review what we had learned the day before. It can be, turn and discuss to a partner, and I'm walking around really listening in on, because kids love to talk. We just have to give them the structure of what to talk about, right? So, that listening in to what kind of information did they gauge from the day before. It could be that yes, no, or I'm not sure activity where they're running, with to review the vocabulary from the day before of, could you teach this to a friend? Go to yes, no, or maybe, and they're going back and forth. So that questioning piece is really important as feedback, because we need to know where to drive the bus next. And that's how I feel. And if you are all over the map, per se, with, not getting feedback from your students, you're never going to know where to move to. So does that mean I need to reteach? Does that mean I need to seek out a colleague for some support when I'm not sure? Because sometimes, in a concept, colleagues will go, I don't know what to do. They're not getting it, So that's when we have our team and family, right? That's when we're discussing, what did you try? And getting different kinds of feedback. It doesn't always have to be a test. It doesn't always have to be a multiple choice questions. It could be writing, it could be art, it could be music, it could be a project. So just allowing the students to drive where it goes, but constantly keeping yourself in check about what they need.
I loved your comment about the asking them a question, getting them talking, letting them talk because they love to talk, and you're walking around and listening. I think that's so powerful, because a lot of times we, in the sort of traditional theories, like if the classroom's super loud, it's not, it's not being managed properly. It's not, they're not behaving, but that's not true, right? That means they're engaged. That means they're going, especially when you're utilizing like that, where, hey, I'm going to give you a prompt. You're going to just have a conversation. I'm just going to kind of walk around the room and listen and get a feel. You can learn so much from that, because now you remove the nerves of, I have to tell the teacher what I know or don't know, versus I'm just talking to a friend, right? Someone who's doing the same thing I am, but you're able to pick up so much of that feedback from that. I love it.
Yeah. And just being really transparent about what you're gauging that feedback for, tell the kids, I'm going to be asking you some questions today, and I want to know how much you learned about this story, or I want to know how much you understand that math concept. So, and then they know, oh, okay, I've got to show what I know. We call it. I've got to show what I know. I've got to give my best. My teacher's looking for something from me.
How often in your classroom does that completely shift and change the plan you had for the day?
Assessment?
Yeah, just the question and the assessment, that feedback. How often is that like, we're like, well, I guess we're not going anywhere where I thought we were going. We need to go this way now.
I mean, I'd say at least once a week, where you think, oh, they've got it. And then they come in the next day and you're like, oh, no.
They don't know.
Let's revisit that.
Which I think is so important. And it's, teachers know this. Teachers are so incredible at the ability of literally changing a million times in a matter of minutes. And I think that's so important in utilizing questions and that assessment piece of the questions to get that feedback and know, like you said, where we got to drive the bus next, I think is so crucial there. So any other techniques that you use in your classroom when it comes to questioning or gaining that feedback from students?
Wow. I mean, there's so many things that are great out there, but I feel like we've covered a good bit of them today.
We really have. We've covered a bunch. So let me get into, let's keep it going, because I want to get it, because I think this will lead us to some other questions and stuff too. We've mentioned your book. We kind of referenced your book, Take Me Home, once or twice. It came out this year, right? Not
July.
Just in July, yeah. Tell us about the book, sort of. I'd love to hear, obviously, like the summary, like the premise of what the book's about. But then if you could also, I'd really love to hear, like, what led you to reading it? Was it because you've always wanted to write a book, or because you felt drawn to tell the story? and then maybe pull a couple of the lessons out from the book that you think we can take into practice today. Someone could take away one lesson.
Sure. So I mentioned that I worked with a particular group of students. For 6 years, I was a high school English language learner teacher. And I worked with about 40 kids from all different walks of life and all different experiences. Some were, like I said, adopted, some crossed the border, some were exchange students, some had been born here, some had come later after their parents, etc. And there was one particular family I worked with, the Lopez family, and I had the liberty to work with all 7 of their children. And they had all boys and one girl. And they were amazing students from South America. And so I worked with them for those at that time period. And in addition to that, all the other kids from almost every continent on the planet. And I left that position and to go back into full-time ELL and reading. And about a year or so after I left that position, one of my students' name was Nancy. She was the only female in this family. And there was helicopters outside one day, and I was teaching at my elementary school, and I was like, oh, we are near train tracks. And I thought, oh, I hope something's okay. Like there's some helicopters flying all over today. I don't know what's going on. And lo and behold, a little bit later, my principal came down to get me because one of the children in the family had been hit by the train. And the trouble with that time not only was which child had been hit by the train, but it was that the parents had been notified that one of their children had been hit, but there was no one in the area that spoke Spanish on the team of police officers that were at the scene. So they couldn't communicate with them to inform them which one of their children had died. Mm-hmm. And the child that had died at that time was my student, Nancy. She was the only female of the group. So we went through that time as a community. We worked with as the family. We were helping them navigate. They weren't sure how to navigate a funeral process here. Mom and dad are still learning English themselves. And I watched this community for about 3 weeks really gather around them. Dad's a pastor in the city, and help them go through the experience of burying their daughter. And at that time, we had such an EL family. We worked with all these students. We had this mantra called, what's your plan? We had alumni connections. They came back every year. They talked to the kids about what's out there, whether it's career or college. The kids stood up for each other, helped each other. You know, it was such a family, a unit. So we went through that experience. And at the time, I had to speak at her funeral and help navigate that. I wrote this poem, and the poem was called Take Me Home. And it was about Nancy's passage and coming to the U.S. So I kind of put it away as we went through that experience and continued to teach. And a couple of years later, I took it back out one day and I thought, you know, maybe somebody could benefit from this story. So I sent it out as a poem at first to a bunch of different publishers. And I thought, well, let me see, you know. So I sent it out, and lo and behold, a few months later, a publishing company comes back and they say, hey, we really like your poem, but we think you can do more. We don't want you to write a poem. We want you to write a book. And we're going to give you about 6 months to do it. And if we like it, we're going to take it on. So I started to think, well, I don't want to just tell her story. I want to tell all of their stories. But I want to do the one thing I felt like it was missing in my education experience, which is a lot of times we know about these kids in terms of their data and their language and their information and their strengths and their questioning techniques and all these great things we can do with them. But now these kids are in their young 30s and late 20s. And no one ever really asked them, now that you're a successful bilingual person living here in America, what was that like for you? What was that really like for you to go through that experience? What kinds of things helped you? What kinds of things hurt you? What kinds of things triumphs, tragedies, etc. So I took about another 6 months and I went back and I interviewed them. And there are 12 of them. And so this is a true story. It's based on the ideas of all 12 of them. Every student got their own chapter, and it's told through a first person's perspective. It's told as them. But I wanted to change their names, not only for protection purposes, but for names of strength. So they have names like Chance and Evidence and Navigate and Embrace and Fuel and Grit, and other names as well that show the strength that they had. And every continent is almost mentioned, and every chapter is a different experience. And I weave Nancy's story through it. And I was able to interview her parents as well. And they were able to tell about her passage and coming here. So we're really proud of it. And it, you know, what motivated me to write it as a support teacher, I felt like I've worked in the field now for over 20 years, and I've worked with amazing kids and amazing teachers and coaching, and I felt like I had something to say. I felt like it's time to advocate even more for these kids and help them have a voice so that our education family can understand some different perspectives.
Man, that is powerful. What was that like for you to go back to these students that have been out of your school for a while now and to hear how their life is going and has gone and the trials and tribulations, everything like that? What was that like for you? I mean, I can only imagine it was a bit of a emotional roller coaster to hear the ups and downs, back and forth. Can you kind of tell us like what that experience was like for you? That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is emotional. It still is sometimes, when I start to talk about it. And, I found that through every experience they've had, and I think this was with any kid, not just ELL kids, they were all really looking for three things from people. They were looking to feel like they were respected, accepted, and admired. They were the three things that kept coming back to them. And whether they were respected and accepted and admired, because it is a positive, uplifting story, they were able to push through it. And I think what I really got to understand and appreciate about them even more was the resilience that they showed and the flexibility that they showed and the courage that their parents showed in having the ability to come here or live here and help their students become successful even when they were unsure themselves. And I think that the biggest piece they struggled with, which we could always help them with, was the navigation piece. And they always come back to me, and that's what they seem to be most thankful for, is the teachers that help them navigate all of the different things they needed in order to be successful here.
Yeah. Wow. So if you could pull, we'll say one major takeaway from the book that you think that you hope people who pick up the book and read through the stories take away as educators, what would be that sort of that key takeaway that you're hoping people would get from it?
I hope that our educators see that when you meet a student who's learning a new language, help them feel like that time of their life is such an asset for them. And the fact that they don't know English yet is not a handicap. They're going to move with them through it until they become proficient and bilingual, and be willing to help them feel that that's this time of their life that they should be treated that way, in addition to their families. And when they're not sure about how to work with the kids, team up with people and support teachers that do, and together you can do great things for them.
I love that I love your focus on the fact that is an asset. It's not a hindrance. It's not a weakness. It's an asset that they have and that they are able to grow. And if you think about it, I mean, you mentioned some of your students earlier that are in elementary level that already speak one, possibly two languages. I mean, that's incredible. Like I think yesterday we were on Brain Break. I can't remember how we got there, but Dave Schmittou mentioned like that he's barely monolingual, let alone bilingual. About these elementary students who can do that, and the fact that they're taken on in a new world or a new life, new home, whatever it is, they're going through this process of learning an entirely new language. Like that is not easy. No. That's not easy when you're learning, like, in Spanish class, when everywhere else in your life you're fine and good, but when you're actually learning it because your life literally is going to depend on you learning it, like that's just really incredible. It's really interesting to me.
It really is.
I love that your book highlights that. So
thank you. And it's tough for them, right? It's 8 hours a day hearing a language that they're learning for the first time, or adjusting their language or adjusting the expressions depending on their level of language proficiency. But it's coming at them so quickly, and their brain's adjusting physically, and they've got to adjust sometimes to a different teacher every 45 minutes with different accents and different speeds and different expectations, and it's a lot of work. So it's exhausting for them.
And all their different friends and people they run into daily, they say things different. We don't all speak exactly the same or properly or whatever you want to say. Like it's so different. The way we use, like you said, the accents, the expressions, the emphasis that we put, the words we choose to use, or how we, the slang terms we use, everything like that. Like that is really difficult. Like,
so if you think about questioning, to come back to that,
yes.
when you're working with ELLs, there's actually different standards and sentence frames and information that provide for you what level of questioning are they ready for, and what kind of supports will they need in order to be successful. And that's something you can get from your EL teacher if you don't have it already, because they have that information for you to help them be set up for success.
And what are those levels?
So you've got entering, beginning, developing, expanding, bridging. And so that kind of moves along the continuum of a new learner all the way to a proficient English speaker. And it provides information about, in the beginning, maybe you can only answer who, what, where, and when questions. And then as you move into a level 3, now you're ready for expansion. So you're having, every day I say to my kids, how's your day? And my new guys will go, good. Well, when I'm ready to push them, I'll go, it's good because, and then that pushes them to the why. Why is it good? So providing that level of questioning at the level they're prepared to be successful for is important. And always think in terms of questioning for students who are learning in the beginning. And this isn't just for ELLs, but maybe kids that are learning to read or not proficient readers at that higher level. Giving them the opportunity to listen to it on audio, giving them the opportunity to practice with a friend before they answer, giving them those sentence frames that they need in order to feel that success. So just always thinking about what are they ready for and how can I provide support for that with the question.
I love that. I'm gonna put you on the spot again because I want to. You're like on the spot all day. I don't know why I'm saying that because you're here as a guest. But you mentioned you ran through all the different levels and you kind of touched on a couple. Would you mind walking us through those levels of, and maybe if you want to use the example like going through, you kind of touched on like the start, but then level 3, like how does that progress in?
Yeah.
And my hope is that people can take this away, like you just said, regardless of whether it's EOL or they're just simply learning to read or they're trying to comprehend anything. I think these levels fit into all of that.
Sure. So I tend to like to give analogies. So I created a visual a while back for one of my teachers where like a new English language learner, if you imagine like a little bird in a nest, right? They're in the nest, they're level 1, they're looking around, they're like, okay, what is this about? What this school structure is different from mine. The teacher's questions are different. Do I get to go home for lunch? Do I have to come back? All of those different ramifications are happening and they're doing a lot of listening to the language. And they may be at a level 1 able to give maybe one-word answers, or maybe a lot of pointing, a lot of nodding, a lot of visual support. That's what they're going to need at that time. A lot of classroom labeling in their home language. Well, the great thing about technology now is we have it at our fingertips in order to use to provide information for our kids. And we use a lot of services like Talking Points, if you're familiar with that. It's a free service that teachers can use for questions for their parents if they're still learning English, or for questions for parents who may not be literate in reading in general. You can use it. It has a lot of features that allows you to write the message in English. It gets translated into the home language that you choose. It goes directly to their cell phone. That's all you need is a phone number. And then they reply in their first language of choice and it comes back to you in English. So it's a great communication tool. We use that. We use Interpretalk, which is a wonderful service if you're familiar with, that has 168 languages available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it's a live person on the phone. So, if you have questions, not only for students that you get stuck, these are district, Interpretalk is one the district pays for, but the Talking Points is free. So if you get stuck during the day and you need to communicate with a parent or a student or a situation happening, there's some great resources you can use there. And yes, Flipgrid. I have not used it myself, but I see a lot of people out there talking about Flipgrid. Thank you for sharing that. Another one is Transact. We use that here in Pennsylvania, and that is translated general education school documents. Again, it's something you can check with your state to see if you have, but at your fingertips are information resources for the schools. There are posters. There are things from we're going on a field trip to your student is truant. There's all different things translated for you professionally by the state. So these are all, I know I'm kind of bridging off a little bit here, but these are
this is awesome. You're dropping a whole bunch of resources here. This is great. I'm loving it.
Yeah, I mean, these are things not only for the kids, but the parents. And I always say, like, it's really important to communicate with the parents in the language they prefer because they're the root. So I say getting the fruit for your kids. They're the resource that you need in order to learn more about what your students need for questioning and everything else under the sun in education. So yeah, there's some great resources there. Then you move to a level 1 kid is in the nest, right? I divulge. And then you go to a level 2-3 kid. So level 2-3 kid, now they're ready for simple sentences. They're ready for who, what, where, when questions. Right? So their vocabulary is probably a little bit what I call $25 word level, which is like, they can give you that easy English, that repeated English, that predictive sentence. And don't forget the importance of literacy and having them read, and it's expanding their vocabulary along with it as much as possible. But once you hit a level 3 student, I say that's like with the sweet spot. I always feel like now they're ready to expand. So now it becomes, where did you go and why was it fun? Where did you eat today and what's your favorite thing about it? They're ready to expand those sentences in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And then from there, you go into your level 4+ students who are starting to become more proficient in English. So all this information, is great. And it's important that you ask a lot of questions, speaking of questions, when you get your new students. So where did they go to school? Did they have formal schooling? What did their school structure look like? Who's here with them in the US? Were they born here? What resources are they going to need? One of the best questions I've ever seen asked to students who are new here, who are very level 1 kids, is write in your native language about what you miss most in your country. Mm-hmm. And even if they write it in a language you've never seen, you can look for predictable patterns to know how strong of a reader and writer they are in their first language. You can notice the same word 10 times. You can check it real quick to see if it's spelled correctly. You can notice if they can only write 2 or 3 sentences versus paragraphs and paragraphs. So there's all types of different techniques you can use to start to gauge information. So I always say, when you get a new student who's an English language learner, make no assumptions and ask a lot of questions and go team up with your EL teacher, because they're the ones that are triggered to find all that information.
Oh, that's powerful. I love how many resources you just dropped in. The comments are saying as well. Curiosity question. How many different languages do you speak? Or are you just one? Okay.
Maybe half, actually. Maybe. So I speak Spanish enough to get by, and I had to use it because I traveled to Salvador 3 times. And I went down there to work with a school that one of my parents here had asked me to help. There was a school in Salvador who had no computers. They'd never seen technology. And they were in what I call the beautiful dirt roads and dogs area of a jungle. And that's not what Salvador is. There's so many different areas, right? There's cities and country area, and it's a beautiful place. But the kids were learning to type on paper keyboards that they had made out of cardboard with a screen of a picture they had drawn and a paper keyboard. And so this one member of the family, he said to himself, down in Salvador, who can help me bring these kids computers? And he said, oh, Miss Bittner can help me bring kids these computers. So long story short, I had to prepare Spanish because I had to go down there. And I finally got that experience of what it feels like to be somewhere where you have no choice but to speak that first language. And it was nerve-wracking. And I laughed my way through it. I was there for a few weeks. And we were able to send those kids 15 laptops, 2 printers, all different kinds of paper. And they were able to build a brick area added onto the school to house the computers because they were such a commodity, and hire a security guard to protect them. And so when they got the computers, it was funny. They actually said, Obama sent us computers, because at the time it was President Obama. And the dad was like, no, Miss Bittner and the team sent you the computers. And it was great. So anyway, yes, I speak some Spanish to get by, but other than that, I've been trained, just like everyone here trains for their different content area, how to read, write, speak, and listen, and teach someone the English language.
That's super cool. That's a cool story. It's a great story, though. What a fun adventure.
Yeah, it's fun.
And eye-opening, I'm sure, in so many ways. Very, very cool. And like you said, you got to have that experience of being on that end of it, which is, I think, something that's hard to imagine if you've never done it. Like, I've never done that, and I can't, like, I can sort of guess, but I'm like, I don't know what that's like. Like, that's really hard to, like, imagine, like, not being able to
communicate.
Speak. Like, that's really tough to do. So
it is. Yeah, it's limiting, right? It's almost like being masked. It's like being masked. It's limiting. You can only have so much you can say.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yeah.
So you walk around kind of in this state of confusion and trying your best. And I would get that headache at the end of the day from hearing Spanish all day, and then being like, okay, I need a break, So I always say that if we don't use these questioning strategies and we don't allow that engagement piece in any kid we work with, like, you're masking them for life in terms of communication skills. And that's what we don't want.
It's funny that you mentioned mask because I'm thinking about. I've talked about this a few times when we've been live randomly. Like, yeah, the mask is interesting. I realize how much I smile at people,
Mhm.
and that I have to be careful because when I'm staring at you, like in a grocery store, smiling, trying to be friendly, if you don't see me smiling, it's just creepy. And I'm like, oh, like when I smile at a kid like with his mom, like I'm a dad, so like when I see a kid who's younger than my kid, I'm like, oh, I'm on my kid that's small, and I want to smile, and I'm like, make sure you wave because if you don't wave, you're just a creepy guy looking at. It's just so anyway,
Yes.
just a fun little side note there. All right, awesome. So I'm loving this. I love how many resources you have dropped for us today. This has been really, really powerful, really cool. I want to get into the next segment here we have there. We're going to drop some good news for you. I got a cool good news story that I want to share and see how we can maybe bring that to our students and share with them. Are you ready for some good news?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Daily Drop-In, where we're live every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. We are going into our good news story for today. So this is something that we like to do every day, which is just share an article we found, a story we found. That's fun. That's a good news. Hopefully, at the very least, it puts a smile on your face, makes you laugh, makes you smile, whatever that is. But also, it's something that hopefully can be a conversation starter either with your friends, your family, your colleagues, or with your students. So this one comes from our friends over at goodnewsnetwork.org, which we go to a lot for this. But there's and I feel like it's the Netherlands. I feel like we pulled a lot of good news stories out of Netherlands. So I don't know if they got something going on over there. But and I actually think this is the same grocery store chain that was mentioned in another one. But one of their big grocers there is called Jumbo. And I believe Jumbo was the one that bought back the gold medal that was donated to raise money, which was another story that we did before, which is you can go check that out there. But they have recently launched, I guess they actually launched a couple of years ago, but now they're launching that's going into hundreds of their stores, what they're calling, and I won't even try to say the name of what they call it because I don't know that language, but it translates into chat lines. So their chat out lines, their chat lines at their checkout lines in their stores where there's lines that are marked and they're meant purely for this is a line that you're going to go slow through because it's focused on, yeah, we're going to ring out your groceries, but you're here to have a conversation. And they're doing it as part of a larger initiative with their government to try to combat loneliness amongst elderly folks because a large portion of the population is 75 plus years old, and they realize the loneliness leads to depression, which was actually lead into a lower mortality age, and they're trying to combat this and trying to do this. And it was a really cool story on just a lot of pictures of people just smiling because maybe possibly as you get older, if they don't have as many loved ones around, they're not close to family, they're just lonely, they like being social. Something that they do is go to the store still, right? So now they have this opportunity to go and sit, and the people that are there at the chat out line and lane are there excited to talk. And they said that what's been really cool on their part from Jumbo is that they're actually having trouble because so many of their employees want to be in that line. They want to be there. They want to have the conversation. It's just a really cool story of a big organization that obviously needs to make profit and has a lot of things to worry about, doing some good, connecting with the government, trying to do some good work. And I think it shows also they've seen such a positive response. It kind of shows the power of conversation, the power of just friendliness. And so that's super cool. I think that's really neat. I wish we had those here. I think we're going the opposite way here in the States. We're like, let's see if we can get through faster and no one in the checkout line. So, which is great in a lot of ways. And they have those things too and whatever. But I would love to walk into my store and see a chat line. I'd get into it every time, I think. So thoughts on that? Like, what do you think about that? And how can we take that story and share with our kids or with our colleagues? And I guess for you also, Andrea, would you go to the chat line or would you avoid it?
I would. The one thing I think about that's great about that idea is it's allowing people to learn more about each other. And conversation and communication is what helps expand our view of the world. And
Yeah.
I think just like picking up a great book, you could get lost in that. You can get lost in a great conversation with people that you've never met before. And I think it'll break down a lot of barriers of assumption. You never know who's going to be in that chat line, and you never know what kind of cool story you'll learn that day, and maybe it'll help you appreciate your life even more.
Oh, boy, yeah. Wow,
yeah,
what a great take on that. Like I was just like, oh, this is cool. You're like, nah, this is gonna break down barriers and have like lasting impact. I love that.
I would definitely check it out.
Super cool. So speaking of good news, one of the other things that we do here, and shout out to Rachel and Bella who put together like this massive list of like every holiday that I can possibly imagine on every day. And Ray has done such an amazing job most days going through them because some of them are very unique. And there's been some days where she's got like 10 holidays to talk about. We only have 2 today, and they're both like regional holidays. But the one holiday is National Love People Day.
Oh, nice.
Not 100% sure what that is, but it sure sounds like a good holiday of just loving people. And I think it connects with this idea of this chat line and just taking the time to spend time with people and learn people and like you said, break down the assumptions and things of that nature. It's also International Podcast Day. So celebrating podcasts, which obviously we love. So if you listen on the Daily Drop and all the podcasts on the Teach Better Talk podcast, happy National Podcast Day, all my podcasting friends. So if you listen to podcasts, you like podcasts, today would be a great day to drop a review, drop a subscribe, share it out with your friends, and celebrate those creators and the value that they're trying to put out in the world and stuff too. So happy National Love People Day and National Podcast Day. So
yes, happy both. Absolutely.
Great. So Andrea, as we get ready to sign off here, I would love for you to share with all of us. So how can we connect with you? How can we continue the conversations with you? Where's the best place to go? Where are you most active on? Give us all of that info.
Sure. So you can follow our journey in a couple different places. On Twitter at Andrea Bittner Books, and same for Instagram, are active on there as well at Andrea Bittner Books. And we also have a Facebook group specific to Take Me Home right now, and that is on Andrea Bittner Books as well.
Tell us about that group. What's going on in the group? What's the focus of the conversation and kind of the value that's going on inside there?
We've had some great conversations. So we've had a ton of great feedback from readers all over the country, teachers, ELL students, directors, immigration centers. We're about to be added to 4 different universities for their education curriculums.
Oh, and really?
So yes. So we have been added to education classes for future teachers at 4 different local universities. And we have some presentations coming up where they're reading the book, and I'm going to get to go and meet them and hear their feedback as well. So all of these people are joining the Andrea Bittner Books, where they're sharing their feedback on the story, their reflections, their connections, their questions. The story has a lot of nuances to it with maps and different pieces of information about how far away the kids were, in addition to their stories. So they're looking forward to connecting with them. The actual members of the book are in the Andrea Bittner Books group. So they are all very active. They're actually working on a very short documentary film called Where Are We Now? And people were really curious about that. They invested, they were rooting, for these young people and that are still here thriving, and they want to know, what are they doing now? So there's a lot of great conversations and questions going on. In addition to that, I was asked to contribute to Dr. Rick Jetter's next book, 100 Things That All Leaders Can Stop Doing. So I did write a chapter for that. And I was just asked to write and contribute to a 3rd book called The Impact of Influence.
Wow. All kinds of writing going on.
Yeah. So I've got some cool future projects coming up. So those things will be incorporated into this as well.
That's good. I was about to ask if there was any other books you're working on. It sounds like you were working on contributing to quite a few, though. Were you part of Rick's, the initial one, the 100 Things That Teachers Should Stop?
I was not, but I read it.
Gotcha. I have a chapter in there. That's why I was curious. I'm like, I don't think I saw your name, but there was a lot of names on that list.
Yeah.
So you're in the second one. Do you know when that's slated to come out?
I think spring.
Is it spring? Okay.
Spring.
Awesome. So lots of really cool stuff going on. So that's awesome. So make sure you're following Andrea, getting that Facebook group. That's really cool to see. I hope you make sure you share with us when the documentary comes out. So we can share that out, because I think people will be interested in learning about that as well. The last thing I want to ask you, we've touched on a lot of stuff there. You've dropped so many resources, and there was a couple one-liners you had that I wanted to reference again, but we kept going into the same one. But man, we need to clip that. There's some really good stuff. So you've already given us so much. But I want to ask you, if there's one thing you can leave us all with today, based on all the stuff we talked about today, what would be like that one thought, that one lesson, that one hopeful, I hope you take this with you kind of thing? What would you leave us with today?
I think that as an educator and a support teacher, in 21 years of teaching, the one thing I've learned that no matter what, whether it's a colleague or a student or a community member or a family member of a student that you're interacting with, people are all looking for the same three things. And people want to feel respected, people want to feel accepted, and people want to feel admired. And if when you can provide those things for any interaction that you have in this field of work, I really think that it's a win-win for everyone. You promote a lot of success and build those relationships that you're going to need to sustain your time as an educator in our country.
Well, that was pretty much perfect way to wrap that up. So I love that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Sure.
Being part of this. Thanks for being in our world and our family. We really appreciate that. Make sure you go connect with Andrea, check out the book. It's a powerful book. We'll be back here again tomorrow. Ray will be here with the amazing Brad Hughes, as always, on Fridays for a daily drop-in, which happens every day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time. And you can also catch it on Teach Better Talk podcast audio later in the day. So if you're on there, thank you for listening. If you've been with us this morning, thank you for dropping in the comments. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you've been on your way to work, hope you have an amazing Thursday, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
I'll see you.